Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today I have another deck list that has been crafted and refined by the Snap.fan Discord. They do a lot of good theory crafting and testing and really trying to get a deck list as optimal and efficient as it can be. So I stumbled upon this one whenever I was looking for a Red Skull build. I had a base bare bones idea in mind of doing something like a Red Skull and a Shang-Chi. And then filling in some of the rest of the pieces, I was missing some of the core aspects that I felt like the deck list needed. You could typically go with a zero play, but that overall just doesn't feel incredibly consistent. And so I wanted to see if there was another way to build it and look at other ideas. And it turns out that they have been brewing this one recently. And so the minds of Vin Kelsier, Dunkoro, Kraken Null, and several others have been involved in kind of refining this one. And overall, it stood out. In my testing, it has performed really, really well. It has a lot of strong counters to a lot of the things that we're seeing in the meta, whether that be strong, high power cards or strong ongoing abilities. And we even have a tiny bit of disruption in a lane. So if they're going for something like a Exodia combo that needs all 4 locations, we can hit that with either a Green Goblin or an Enchantress to counter it. And then in addition to that, this also pushes out a decent amount of power as well, which is going to be really critical in being able to run these tech cards that you want to be able to counter those lanes. And the best thing about running tech cards is that a lot of times that allows you to go all the way to turn 6 in your games. A lot of times that will kind of lull the enemy into a false sense of security where they snap. You can snap back knowing that you have the perfect counter to their huge sunspot, the perfect counter to their Nidavellir location where you can just drop your Shang-Chi and destroy the whole thing. Just a lot of great play lines with this deck. In essence, it is a counter or control style deck that uses the Magic Sarah combination so that we can drop both Shang-Chi, Enchantress, or Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Killmonger, Enchantress, or any of our other cards if we need a power push on that last turn. And it works really, really well for my testing so far. Running through the deck list really quickly. First up, we have Nova. Nova is going to be our only 1-cost card in the list. The reason he's in this list is that we can drop him later down the line when we drop a Killmonger and we have 8, 9 cards on the board. He's going to offer a really good board presence and board push that can sometimes be forgotten about. If we drop Nova and then we just start dropping all these other random cards like Domino or Morph, it can sometimes be forgotten that Nova is on the board and then that we have the kill trigger with Killmonger in our hand. And then next up we have Domino. Domino in this list, since we don't run a very specific combo where we need a Mr. Negative early, or where we need all of these combo pieces to make it function, and we don't have any other 2-cost cards that would be higher priority, Domino is a way to make sure that we have at least a decent play on turn 2 at 2 cost, 3 power. She's not the best board presence, but it does help guarantee that we have some kind of presence on the board by turn 2. And overall, it felt a little bit better than some of the other cards you could tech in. And Mysterio just took up a little bit too much space. And then the other 2-cost cards like a Scorpion just were a little bit too inconsistent. You don't really want to draw into a Scorpion on turn 6. And so this way we can at least guarantee that we have her and she clears out of our deck so that we can draw into more impactful things by turn 5 and turn 6. And then next we have Green Goblin. Green Goblin is a phenomenal card right now. There are so many decks that run a really greedy combo, and so if you sneak in a Green Goblin, a lot of times you can capture that location if it is a Mr. Negative deck, and you can cap it out with a Green Goblin before they drop their inverted Iron Man on that final turn. A lot of times you can sneak that win away by clogging up that very particular lane where they need that power push. And then we have Morph. As the game progresses, as people start really refining and making their decks more efficient, usually dropping Morph on curve is going to pay off more times than it doesn't. There are going to be some downsides where maybe you end up morphing into Misty Knight. Maybe you end up morphing into a Professor X. It locks down the lane and they played something else there that turn. But for the most part, a lot of decks curve into turns 3, 4, and 5 very heavily. And so a lot of times we can sneak out and get an Iron Man. We can get a Sarah. We can get a Thor. We can get a lot of really good cards with the morph on curve. And then we have Killmonger. Killmonger is one of our late game drops. We usually want to hold him until later in the game to give the enemy some time to drop all of their 1-cost cards onto the board, and then we can finally destroy them all at the end of the game. This is also going to be good for countering the junk style meta that we've kind of found ourselves in, where if they flood our board with rocks, we can clear that space and that place on the board with our Killmonger. And then we have Thor. Thor, now that he is 3, can be curved into a little bit easier. We can drop Thor, it shuffles a Mjolnir into our list. Since we are planning on extending the game with magic on the majority of games, there is a higher chance that we draw into Mjolnir. Even if we don't draw into Mjolnir, or if we draw into it, we just don't have the space to play it. Overall, he's still a good card to have on the board, and he has that potential upside. So it's kind of like Mysterio in the fact that it causes those like mind games it could force the opponent to over-invest in that lane if you're not actually going for it and you shift into the other two. And then we have Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is going to be great in combination with a Red Skull. Sometimes we'll be able to use this to push a lane up over that 9 power threshold so that we can then wipe it with Shang-Chi. Just a absolutely huge combo. And then Shang-Chi is good by himself. Maybe you're running up against a Lockjaw list and they flipped into all of their cards. They have like some really big units in like Magneto, Infinite, Chavez. You can destroy all of those and swing a game really quickly in your favor, usually netting either 4 or 8 cubes in the process. And then we have Enchantress. Enchantress is great at clearing all of the high greed combos. So if you're running up against a Wong, you can drop this on that turn 5 play to make sure that they don't get any great upside from it. A lot of times a Wong deck list, if they're wanting to trigger all of their own reveal abilities several times, so that whether that be a Gambit, whether that be any number of on reveal cards, Enchantress is going to really mitigate that potential power output by wiping that ongoing ability. And then even if they do get a Mystique off, you're going to clear both of them with this card. And then we have Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones is a great 4-cost card now. She has an incredible power presence of 8 power onto the board at 4 cost, and we have the additional turn to play into that lane later on. And so this is a great card to follow up an opponent's maybe Storm, or just put into a Crimson Cosmos lane, or just any lane by herself, and then we skip that lane on that next turn to push more power either on turn 6 or turn 7, and just for a big amount of power onto the board. And then we have Magic. Magic is going to be one of those cards that it continues getting used until it has to be addressed. Magic in combination with Sarah creates so many potential play lines. We can very easily drop Sarah on 5 into a Magic and something else on 6, allowing us to do some insane late game combos on 7. And so Magic fits into this deck list really, really well into that kind of counter archetype where we are wanting to control what the opponent has on the board, and we're wanting to wipe their big strategies, their big board presences from the game. And then we have Sarah. Since neither Sarah nor Magic got touched this patch, their power presence is just as impactful as it was before. Sarah can enable some absolutely insane turn 6 and turn 7 plays, and at 5 power is a pretty decent card. And so this is an auto include. This is one of the core cards along with Magic in this list, but overall I think the list feels great as is, and I think it'd be really hard to start switching out cards to find a different kind of play line or potential play line. And then finally we have Red Skull. At his worst, he is a 5-cost 7 power card, which is okay. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. But at his best, he is a 5-cost 15 power card. And then he also enables us to wipe their board with a Shang-Chi. So maybe we just drop this into a lane and we didn't have any other resources there. And then we drop the Shang-Chi on that final turn and we can wipe it out. A lot of times, even if we just wipe out 1 or 2, the lower power cards are not going to have enough oomph to get that lane over that threshold of the 15 power play. And so that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a few games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Jomo Sapien, and the first card we have is our Nova, so we are going to go ahead and just throw that onto the board. That's going to be more for like a late game kind of surprise presence. We're going to be able to destroy it with a Killmonger and buff up the rest of our board. Ooh, we will be able to clear Savage Land as well, so that's not terrible. But with turn 2, we get Grand Central. I'm going to go ahead and play Domino into this 3rd unknown location right now. Just because right now it is still the hot location. Most of the time this deck list is going to be used outside of the Crimson Cosmos hot location, and so you wouldn't have to worry about playing it over there. And we got the anticipation correct. We were able to play it into the lane, and now only 4, 5, and 6 cost cards can be played there. So we're going to go ahead and play our Thor into the Grand Central location. We are going to be able to destroy this Sunspot and their Raptors, so if it looks like they're relying on it just a little bit too much in the late game, we do have a counter for them. Okay, and so they end up storming the Savage location, so that's kind of unfortunate. Ooh, but we get a Morph. I think we drop Morph here. I think we go to the Morph Casino. And we're actually going to snap on the Morph Casino. At the very least, we'll be able to get it buffed up by 1 with our Nova. At the very worst, it'll end up being like nothing, and we'll have to rely on winning the left and the right lane. So it shifts into their Lady Sif, which discards our Sarah, so we no longer have that as a potential play line. So if we draw into a Red Skull here, that's pretty decent. We can drop our Red Skull here. We'll pull into a Killmonger or a Shang-Chi. Killmonger is going to feel more advantageous for us because it will destroy their Sunspot. Shang-Chi doesn't really have a great target. So we do get the upside. We get the Killmonger destruction. That's going to buff up our Thor, our Killmonger, and then the right side of our lane, since they did push us out of the flooded location. So they drop a wave. So we are only able to drop one card on this final turn, which turns out is fine. So they're going to have an 8 power play into the Grand Central with their Ghost Rider Dr. Doom. They turn first. No, we turn first. Ooh, this is perfect. So we turn first. I anticipate a Ghost Rider here. So Ghost Rider being 3 power, if we can get the Green Goblin over there before it reveals, Dr. Doom wouldn't be able to resummon. It wouldn't be able to push that power into middle or the right lane. But more importantly, it wouldn't be able to have that 5 power push in Grand Central, which would give us the slight advantage that we needed to keep this lane locked down. And so they do end up retreating, but we did find a pretty decent play path to interrupt their potential Ghost Rider. So even if they did want to kind of gamble on that, we had the counter for them. All right, and so next up we have Kytrus. And the first location is Fisk Tower. We don't have any kind of movement style cards, but we may want to play a couple of resources over there early just in case one of these turns out to be a location that moves cards over. And it looks like they're running a Patriot deck, which is going to be great for us. We'll be able to drop a late game Enchantress, which usually will derail a Patriot's entire biggest power push. It's not going to derail all of it, but most of the time it will be enough that we can swing those locations in our favor by canceling out the Patriot, the Onslaught, Patriot Mystique Onslaught, or any kind of subsect of those. So we do have our Thor that I think we play into the Savage Land here. And we'll want to leave space in the Savage Land for like a Mjolnir. We will be able to destroy the Raptors at some point, but I almost want to wait until the final turn to do that. Ooh, and so it looks like it would have been more advantageous for us had we dropped our Thor into the far left location. But we do have a Jessica Jones. We'll be able to drop Jessica Jones. Depending on how much power they push there, we might be able to counter it. It just depends at this point. So we have the Jessica Jones, which will end up being 8 power. They throw a Shocker there, but as of right now, it's not going to be enough. They would have to push some additional power into that location to swing it. And then if they're wanting to do the Patriot, this is the only location where they can do that. I think we drop our Sarah. Let's go ahead and snap. We know that we have the Killmonger to kill their Misty Knight here. It'll kill their Raptors. So they had limited space to play Patriot, Mystique, or the Onslaught. They didn't have any location where they could play all 3. Our Thor was going to get pretty large unless they could really buff this one up. We were going to be able to counter it, and then the Sarah came in. We were going to be able to really finish locking down this location. So a 1-cube victory, but still a victory. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have Bobby. And in our starting hand, we have a couple of our good counter cards. In the Shang-Chi, Killmonger, Enchantress, that kind of hits the gambit for if we extend the game with magic, we can drop either the Shang-Chi and Killmonger. If we end up getting a Sarah, we can drop either the Shang-Chi and the Enchantress or any subsect of those. The first location is nowhere, so we're not going to be able to counter that location. That one's going to be a little bit harder to play around, so we may need to do something like a Red Skull over there. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to get enough power to get what we need. We could always do... Ooh, and so they drop a Goose, so that's going to make putting power into that far right lane a little difficult. I think they were hoping for probably the Crimson Cosmos location, which didn't end up turning up. But let's go ahead and go with a Green Goblin into the Bifrost that will push it up over here, and it'll start kind of taking up some of their space. It negatively impacts their board. It keeps ours clear for our late game combo pieces. And then they have a Gambit, which discards a Crystal. Interesting, very interesting. Very interesting deck so far, Bobby. But it does clear our nowhere location, so we do have to be kind of aware of that play line that just happened. So let's go with a Morph into the Bifrost. We'll always be able to shift it over into New York if we want to, but it just depends on what we roll into. A lot of the decks these days are really high roll-esque. They run a lot of really strong cards. And so this one actually, the payoff of this one was phenomenal. We were able to pull into their Ronin, which is huge. That is a huge power presence unless they can really start dumping their hand. But I think what we do is we go with a Jessica Jones into New York, and then we kind of wait and see what they play or what it looks like they're going to play. So we did want the vulnerability of Jessica Jones to trigger. They dropped their Ronin into New York, so they don't currently have any 1-cost cards. The only real benefit that we have for our turn 3 play is either the... I guess we could draw into our Thor, which would be able to drop along with a Shang-Chi on turn 7. But I think instead we're just going to... I think we go ahead and go for the end. I think we go for the ender here. We try to finish this one off. If they have a way to counter this Ronin, then we end up losing. If they don't have an additional power push here, then we will end up winning based on these 2 lanes. So I'm hoping that they play some cards into nowhere. Maybe they go with, if they go with an Odin to re-trigger the Gambit, that could actually tank us as well. That would have a 1 out of 3 shot of giving them the win here. Ooh, or a little bit more, it would trigger the Green Goblin to send back over our way. But we do counter the Ronin, and then the Arnim Zola actually comes in, and it's going to copy a 0 power Ronin across the board. So we win the middle and the right location. Because we had initiative going into that last turn, we were able to comfortably make that happen. Otherwise, the win would have went to Bobby, but fortunately, we did reveal first, and the Enchantress does end up paying off for us. All right, so next up we have Bobby once again. Back for revenge. Bobby seeking for that payback from the Enchantress on that last game. So that was just the cue just before this one. And so we do draw into Savage Land, which is going to be, we are going to be able to play around that location. I think we play our Domino into the far right. On 3, we will probably play Thor into the Savage Land location, and then we'll kind of play it out and see. Okay, and so they play a Goose over into the far right lane. We're not going to be able to push much power over there. But what we can push is a Thor. We can push a Thor over there, but that's going to cause us to draw into rocks. So maybe we just go with a Green Goblin for now into the Savage Land. Leave this location kind of as is. If we can counter their potential Ronin play before it happens, then we will be able to prohibit them from pushing any power over into the Lechugia. And so they actually play another card over there, which is interesting. That's going to force them into a rock draw. Okay, so the 7 power Maximus is pretty big, but we also have a lot of our big resources now. And so that pushes us almost all the way through our entire deck list. So what we're going to do is we will play Jessica Jones. Next turn, we will play something like a Sarah into the Savage Land. That will allow us to play Magic, which we should comfortably draw into by 6. We have 2 more draws, so we have 2 out of 3 chance that we would draw into it by then. If not, then we can just drop a lot of our resources from the Sarah on turn 6. And while they're waiting, we're going to go ahead and snap. That may cause them to retreat, but we do have a pretty solid hand. The Maximus was actually pretty good to us by being able to force us into our key win conditions, whether that be an Enchantress, a Shang-Chi, or a Magic to extend the game so that we can comfortably counter both. So they do drop their Crystal into the far left lane, which is a very interesting tech choice that they have. So I think what I want to do is drop our Sarah into the Savage Land. If we can draw into Magic next turn, that's going to be great, because we'll be able to drop Magic on turn 7. We'll actually be able to drop both a Shang-Chi and an Enchantress. So if they drop, let's say, a Ronin and duplicate the Ronin, we will be able to push and destroy both lanes that have that in place for a huge tempo swing or tempo advantage. And so they drop the Ronin, which is, acceptable. That's understandable. And so we do draw into our Magic play. And so that is going to be pretty good to us. Actually, this lane is going to be tough. We're not going to be able to counter over there. They have initiative, so they'll be able to turn first. So I think what we do is we change this location with Magic. And then I think we drop our Thor into the Gia. We only have 1 additional card we can draw into, but that's going to give us a somewhat decent power push for the final turn. And so whatever they're going to end up trying to play, maybe an Arnim Zola, it could hit the right target, may just hit Crystal, which is the lowest roll that they could possibly get there. And so now we know what power level they have in Savage Land. We know that we have a strong counter in Limbo, and we might also be able to push enough power into the Gia to compete with them there as well. We're going to go with an Enchantress into the Limbo location, and then after that, I don't think it really matters what we go with. We could go with like a Red Skull to really elevate our power level here. I don't know that they have a way to push power into a pre-existing lane. So maybe if we kill their card with the Enchantress, or maybe they have a Cosmo, which would counter the Limbo play here. I almost want to push power into the Savage Land, but I think we play this one as is. We just let this one play out. Maybe they have a strong counter to this, but we are going to get rid of 2 of our cards. That's going to reduce the power of their Ronin. And maybe we can get the upside that we need. Ooh, so they drop an Iron Man, but we do go with an Enchantress. That is not going to do it for them. Their Baron Mordo does force us to draw into an additional card, but we have a Red Skull. We then have an Enchantress, which will cancel out their Iron Man and their Ronin, leaving only a 2 power Arnim Zola. actually a 0 power Arnim Zola, because we cancel out our red skull as well. So we swing the left by a lot and the middle by a decent amount to take away the second win with Bobby. And we're actually going to wait a second before we queue into the next one. I don't like playing against the same person multiple times in a row. I don't think it's fun if I end up winning all 3. I feel bad for the opponent. If we kind of trade back and forth, we also know each other's decks at that point, and it becomes a little bit less of an element of surprise and more so kind of teching your play to their deck. All right, so next up we have Nightwing. We do have a morph that we're going to be able to drop on curve on 3 to see if maybe we hit the high roll. A lot of decks nowadays do run a really greedy deck list, and so a lot of times we can get the upside from a morph play. And so for turn 2, we're just going to drop our Domino. That's going to be our only consistent turn 2 play, because we don't run any other 2 costs in this deck list. That way it's a consistent play across the board. They drop an Angela. I think we're going to go with a morph into the middle location here and see what we flip into. I mean, you could always flip into a Professor X and get a cheeky lane lockdown. You could flip into a Destroyer, a Khazar, so you get some extra information. So we know that they're going to be running 1-cost cards, which is going to be phenomenal for us. We do have a Killmonger, so all we have to do is hold that till almost the very end of the game, and then we can get a huge payoff from it. So like this lane, we're going to be able to wipe all but 7 of their power. So we know that all we need to do is push like a Jessica Jones into that lane. Once we drop Killmonger on turn 6 or 7, we're going to be able to swing this location. So we have a lane, we have the game locked down very, very easily. So they do end up retreating, which was a good call from their end. With a Khazar Zoo style deck list, it is so susceptible to Killmonger that especially when you're running it deep in pool 3 or even just intro into pool 3, it is kind of scary. You lock down the lane and then you're just susceptible to that potential counterplay. And a lot of times if you don't retreat once an opponent snaps, it turns into a 4 cube, 8 cube game, which the opponent knew all along that they were going to win and could swing. Oh, right. And so next up we have Q, which if you're not active in our live streams, Q it has been dubbed our rival, our arch nemesis. Me and Q, whenever we queue into each other, it's typically a max snap game, and then we just see who can play it out the best. Q is very, very versed in like really hard counter deck lists, and so since we're running a counter deck list ourselves, I'm really curious how this one plays out. And so I am going to go ahead and play our Domino into the Strange Academy. And if you are a channel member, we also have a Q emoji because we play against him so much, and it's just like a fun event that we do during the live streams, that he actually has earned his own emoji. So whenever we queue into him, everyone spams the emoji. It is phenomenal. So if you are a channel member, definitely drop a Q emoji down below. Not the Mjolnir emoji. We don't speak of that incident. The Q one is definitely much more fit for this situation. So I think we're going to drop our Thor into Strange Academy. We want to kind of push some of the power from here into the Gia. That way we don't prohibit our deck's draw nearly as much. We're going to shuffle Mjolnir into our deck. We do have Sarah that we're going to be able to drop on 5. I think here we drop a Jessica Jones and kind of hope that Strange Academy pushes the cards off to the left instead of off to the right. Ooh, and Q's running a Mr. Negative list. So I'm sure that there's going to be some interesting play lines and play potential. But we know that we have a strong counter against like Ronin, Iron Man, and those sorts of plays. And so let's go ahead and throw the Sarah into middle. We will let Jessica Jones get buffed up. If it sends some of these cards over there, that's fine. If it splits them up, that's fine as well. Okay, and so Q drops a Sarah as well, so they're going to be able to push quite a bit of power. We may want to anticipate a potential magic play from their end, which would end up being pretty nice. Ooh, so all 3 of our cards go off over to the left, and so that gives us a decent power level over there, as long as he doesn't have a way to stop us from dropping any additional power. So I think we're going to drop a Nova, drop a Green Goblin, and then we'll drop a Killmonger all into the middle location. If it ends up that he extends the game with magic, that's fine. If not, I think that may be enough to swing these 2 locations. At least at this point, I don't think he has a huge power presence, and we're going to be able to buff up just a little bit. So if he's planning on pushing the power to 12 or to 8, then we will have a slight counter to him. So he drops quite a few cards in mid. We cap it out with Green Goblin, so I'm curious what he has. Okay, so the Ronin and then the Arnim Zola, ooh, which counters the Green Goblin and not the Ronin, which sends it back our way. We do win the left lane, and we'll have to see if we win the right lane. It's only a 6. Oh, it's a 6 power presence. Oh my gosh, we got so very lucky. And so then Mystique comes in and copies the Iron Man. The Green Goblin was a harder counter than I ever could have imagined there. The Arnhem Zola would have came in absolutely critical in pushing power here and here. It was just a beautiful last turn play. A lot of good inverted cards that he had. The inverted Ronin and Arnhem Zola, both absolutely huge. And then he was able to naturally drop the Iron Man and the Mystique. But we got very, very lucky that he lost the 50-50 coin flip, and that we had power enough to keep the lead in both the left and the right lane. But as far as epic boss battles go, that feels like a good spot to end this video. That was actually 6 games in a row that we won. We didn't drop any in between the start of this video and now. So this deck list, at least for the moment, is incredibly consistent. We didn't get much usage out of like a Red Skull drop, but the combo essentially is that you push up their power up above that 9 power threshold so that you can get more Shang-Chi targets, you can pull them back down, and it allows for a lot more flexibility in your playline if that is something that you end up needing to drop. But overall, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.